The desert winds howled like ancient spirits through the sandstone cliffs of Zavara, carrying with them the scent of scorched earth and the rustle of 1,000 watchful eyes. The arena, a great circle carved into the red rock, shimmered with the heat of the noon sun. In its center stood Valara of Zara, spear planted firmly into ground, her skin the radiant blue of desert twilight, her hair a curtain of white fire. Adorned in golden battle gear etched with old runes, she faced the east gate, where her challenger would soon appear. She stood tall, a living legend among her people. Not just a warrior princess, but the flame that had refused to be extinguished through 5 years of war. Her eyes were fixed on the dust cloud rising beyond the threshold, a promise of another fight, another test of her will. Her grip tightened on the spear's shaft. No man had bested her in combat, nor walked away unbloodied. Trumpets howled. The crowd, high in the cliffs above, erupted as the gate thundered open. The figure that emerged moved with the practiced ease of one who had seen too many battlefields to be awed by a new one. He was tall, broad, and unarmored except for leather and iron at his shoulders and wrists. His face bore no helmet, only the calm confidence of a man who knew why he had come. Cain Draven. His name had been whispered across borders and carried on mercenary tongues. Prince of the Verdant Empire, breaker of sieges, son of a peacekeeper king. He wasn't Iran, and that made him dangerous. Foreigners came with demands or delusions. This one came alone on foot and carried no shield. Valara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the arena air like a blade. You know the cost of standing here, foreigner? Cain nodded once. Victory or binding, death or union. The crowd gasped. Those were not the words of a man here to conquer. They were the terms of the spear right, invoked only once in a century, and even then, only by Zerans themselves. If a warrior sought union through battle, not marriage, and survived a lethal strike, the ancient law bound the two forever. It was a blood pact older than kings. You're not of our people, she said, wary. You have no right to invoke it. I have cause, he replied, and I've paid the price. My blood, spilled on your borders. My sword, sheathed before your gates. Let the right decide the rest. The high priest, seated in stone robes above the ring, made no objection. Silence descended like a curtain. The right, once invoked, could not be denied. Valara raised her spear, golden tip gleaming like a shard of sun. She didn't hesitate. She never did. Cain drew a short blade, curving and cruel in design, and braced. They circled each other, feet silent in the sand. Her movements were liquid, coiled with deadly grace. His patient and unreadable. She struck first, fast, a blur of light and motion. He dodged, then parried the follow-up slash. They moved like fire and water, her strikes blazing with fury, his defenses fluid, controlled. Then she leapt back, spun once, and hurled her spear with the force of a thunderclap. It sang through the air, a streak of wrath and intent. Cain dropped to one knee, the blade flying from his hand as he raised his arms in defense. The spear hit, glancing off his shoulder and embedding deep in the arena wall behind him. Blood poured from the gash it left, but he still breathed, still knelt, still alive. A gasp rose from the crowd. Valara's face hardened, then stilled. He had survived. The high priest's voice rang clear, heavy with finality. The bond is forged. The right is honored. Valara stood motionless, her jaw clenched, every fiber being coiled against the verdict. The silence inside her was louder than the crowd's roar. She had thrown to kill. She had failed. Cain rose, his chest rising and falling with exertion. He made no move to approach her. He did not smile nor gloat. I meant what I said, he said quietly, only for her. This was not to claim you. It was to stop the war, to give our people something other than death to follow. Valara turned from him and walked away. Later that evening, the desert sky bled into a deep crimson, and the ceremonial chamber atop the cliffs was lit with sacred flame. The stone around them echoed with the chants of bond forging, but neither warrior looked at the other. Cain stood with his wound still bandaged, wearing formal wrappings of unity. Valara's expression was carved from granite. Her attendants had urged acceptance. This law was ancient, immutable. To reject, it would be to lose the loyalty of her people, to appear weak. She hadn't spoken since the rite was declared complete. When the flames flared one final time and the priest declared them bound, not in marriage, but in warrior blood unity, Cain spoke once more. I will not chain you. I asked for the bond so the war would end. I never asked for ownership. Still, she said nothing, but in the shadows behind her silence, something had shifted. A storm was coming, one neither of them could yet see, and they would face it together, whether they willed it or not. Their bond was sealed, but the battle was far from over. The halls of Zara's high keep, carved into the cliffs themselves, were silent save for the measured clack of Valara's boots. The stone walls, lined with banners of past glories and flickering sconces, bore witness to her fury. She moved like a blade unsheathed, tension in every step. Behind her, two advisors struggled to keep pace. This is untenable, said General Theda's voice low, though urgency throbbed in it. Your people see the bond as sacred. To reject it would shatter their faith. Yes, I've heard. Valara snapped, spinning to face him. But what of my faith? Theda's? Well, the cost of me. The general flinched, but held his ground. You are Zara's daughter. You carry the burden of more than yourself. She turned away again, hands balled into fists. Rage warred with humiliation in her chest, and beneath it all, a sharp, stubborn splinter of doubt. She had trained her whole life to lead through strength, to become a symbol untouchable by tradition's chains. And now she was shackled by the very laws she had sworn to transcend. She had not wept in years, and she would not start now. In a chamber far from the thunder of her steps, Cain sat alone beneath a carved archway, watching the dusk stretch across the sands. His shoulder ached, but he'd borne worse. It was the silence that gnawed at him now, not the quiet of stone, but the absence of words from Valara. Since the rite, she had not acknowledged him, not even when the priests bound their wrists in ritual blood, not when the crowd cheered and tradition declared them joined. He had not expected warmth, but he had not imagined her fury would run so deep. His fingers traced the edge of the binding band still wrapped around his wrist, the gold thread catching the last light. He hadn't invoked the right to take anything. He'd done it to stop what he knew would become a war without end. Verdant scouts had seen Zara's forges burning day and night. 1,000 more spears would soon pierce the border. 1,000 more sons would die. So he'd chosen the only path left, challenged the firebrand princess herself, and she had nearly killed him for it. A knock echoed on the arch. He turned as Theda's entered, weary eyes flicking over him. She wants to dissolve the bond, the general said without preamble. But the people won't accept it, Cain finished. I know. That's not why I'm here. Theda studied him. You don't want to control her? I want peace, Cain said quiet. I want to give our children a chance to not grow up knowing only enemies. I would have allied with her on any terms. This was the only way she couldn't refuse. And yet she still does in all but law. Cain nodded. Then let her. I didn't come to claim. I came to serve. The night that followed was long, and the stars over the desert sky were cruelly still. Valara stood in the chamber of flames, watching the firelight cast shadows on her armor. She'd returned here many times in her life, before battles, after loss, when decisions weighed too heavily to bear alone. The flames were sacred, said to whisper the blood of Zara's true heirs. But tonight, they gave no comfort. She remembered the look in Cain's eyes when she threw the spear, focused, resolute, but not cruel. He had knelt, knowing he might die, knowing he was asking for something she had never wanted to give. It wasn't weakness she saw in him. That was the worst part. It was something closer to honor, and maybe that frightened her more. Behind her, a soft voice intruded. If you strike me again, I'll know I'm still unwelcome. Valara didn't turn. You are not welcome, but you are here. I can't undo that. Cain stepped forward, slowly. Then I'll ask only one thing. Speak to me plainly. She turned, her expression unreadable. Why did you truly come? Cain Draven, spare me the poetry. He met her gaze. Because I have seen the bones of boys on our fields. Because I have buried brothers to a cause neither of us believes in anymore. Because I know that if we do not stop this, our children will drown in the blood we spill. Her jaw tightened. You speak of children, yet you invoked a right that binds me to you, makes me yours by law. No, he said, firm. It binds us to each other. There is no ownership in the old words, only union. I don't want a slave or a prize. I want an equal, a weapon at my side, not in my hand. She searched his face, looking for deceit. She didn't find it. Words are easy, she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Then give me a chance to prove more. For a long moment, they stood in silence, two warriors born from different fires, caught in a tradition older than either their thrones. Finally, she spoke. There's a rite of dissolution, but it cannot be invoked for 3 cycles. Until then, the bond stands. He nodded. Then until it breaks or holds, I am yours as much as you are mine. The moon rose high above the cliffs, casting pale light on the 2 warriors in the chamber of flame. Neither moved to leave. In the days that followed, they were seen together, rarely speaking, never touching but present. Cain dined beside her at the war table, but never spoke out of turn. He trained in the arena's lower rings, never challenging her again. He met her generals with respect, not command. And she watched. She watched how he deferred to her decisions, how he listened more than he spoke, how he treated her warriors not as enemies but as kin untested. And slowly, grudgingly, something shifted. The bond still burned. The law still held her against her will. But where once she felt only the cold of the cage, now she sensed the faintest warmth of choice. Not full freedom, but the beginning of one. She did not yet trust him, but she had begun to believe he might not betray her. And in a land where betrayal had written the history of kings, that was no small thing. The bond had not yet forged love, but it had forged possibility. And possibility, she knew, was often the spark that lit the fire. The desert wind carried more than heat now. It carried rumor. In the border villages, people whispered of strange unity, of 2 leaders once sworn to each other's destruction, now sharing council fires. In the capital, courtiers hedged their bets, unsure whether to prepare for wedding feasts or renewed war. But in the fortress atop the cliffs, where the sun met stone and blood had soaked the arena sands, a different struggle brewed. Violara stood on the eastern ramparts, eyes locked on the horizon. Below her, a caravan moved across the sand, verdant colors flapping on half the standards, Jaran on the others. A joint envoy, her idea reluctantly executed. And yet, the sight stirred something complicated within her. Pride, perhaps, or dread. She didn't turn as footsteps approached. She recognized them. Cain never walked like a soldier when they were alone. No sharpness, no rhythm, just presence. You saw the envoy leave? He asked, stopping beside her. I see everything that leaves this place. His silence stretched a moment too long. Then, quietly, you trust him to carry your name? No, her eyes narrowed. But I trust what will happen if they don't. A pause, then a low chuckle. Still wielding fear better than a blade. It served me longer. He leaned forward on the parapet, hands folding against the sun-warmed stone. It shouldn't have to. Not forever. She turned, studying him. The bandage from their battle was gone now, leaving only a scar. Not deep but visible. A mark she had given. She couldn't decide if it made her feel powerful or guilty. You believe in forever? She asked, unexpectedly. He didn't answer right away. Then, I believe in trying. That's the best we get. They stood together in the quiet, an uneasy peace settling between them. But peace, they both knew, was never without its enemies. By nightfall, the storm reached them, not of sand or wind, but of blood. A rider arrived under a broken flag, barely clinging to life. He fell at the palace gates, robes soaked in crimson, and gasped the name of a village on the verdant border. A massacre. 50 dead. Children among them. Jaran blades left in their backs. Cain found her in the war hall, already armored. She didn't wait for questions. I had no hand in this. I know. The look they shared was brief but sharp, an acknowledgement of the stakes. Someone wanted the bond broken. Someone willing to slaughter innocents, to ignite the flames again. Who? She asked. Kane's jaw tightened. I have enemies. So, do you? But this is calculated. She nodded. They want war. They want us to react. So what do? We give them what they want. Her voice was steel, but not the way they expect. A day later, they rode together for the border. The first time since the right they had left to keep as allies, if not something more. Their arrival sparked whispers. Kane knelt with survivors. Violara stood guard as they buried the dead. She spoke little, but her presence, known, feared, was enough to keep the grief from spilling into fury. They investigated together, side by side, and what they found was damning. The blades left behind bore Geron markings, yes, but crudely etched, unlike any her forges produced. The killer's escape had been swift, too swift for locals to track. And among the ruins of one home, Kane discovered a silver token buried in ash. Verdant Elite, a soldier's seal, one that should not have been there. When he showed it to her, her eyes didn't widen. They burned. They want us to tear each other apart, she said. Whoever they are. And if we don't, then they come for us directly. The choice that followed was not easy, but it was clear they would not divide forces. They would hunt the truth together. Night after night, they traveled, secretly, swiftly, through villages, camps, and strongholds. Every clue revealed more rot beneath the surface. Loyalists from both kingdoms working in shadows, exchanging letters and gold. They uncovered caches of stolen weapons, maps marked with Zara's vulnerable routes, and missives signed only with a broken circle. A symbol neither recognized, but one that appeared again and again. Their bond, once born in blood and resentment, had become something else in the crucible of this pursuit. Trust, if not yet tenderness. Respect, if not yet love. They learned each other's patterns. She discovered he prayed over meals in a tongue long dead. He learned she sharpened her blades in silence, never letting servants touch them. They rarely spoke of personal things, but their silences were less hostile now. Companionable, necessary. One night, by a fire beneath the stars, Kane watched her as she rested, armor off, hair loose over one shoulder. She caught him looking and didn't flinch. What is it? He hesitated. You're different when you're not holding a weapon. She arched a brow. And you're braver when I am. He laughed, genuine. Probably. She didn't smile, but the corners of her mouth softened, just slightly. The next morning brought betrayal. Their camp was ambushed, assassins masked and silent, blades coated in poison. It was her scream that warned him. He turned in time to see her cut down two, but a third had already struck. Kane surged forward, catching the blade meant for her in his shoulder. Blood poured, hot and fast, and he collapsed at her feet. She killed the rest. Fast, merciless. And when it was over, she dropped beside him, tearing the poisoned blade from his skin with shaking hands. Don't you dare, she hissed, voice ragged. You do not die like this. I wasn't planning to, he rasped, coughing. You're far too terrifying. She pressed cloth to the wound, her touch uncharacteristically gentle. You shouldn't have jumped in. You would have done the same. Her hand stilled. Yes, the poison didn't kill him, but it kept him unconscious for a full day. She stayed by his side, feeding him sips of bitter antidote, her expression unreadable. When he woke again, pale and feverish, she didn't speak, just rested her hand lightly on his. He didn't pull away, and for the first time, she didn't either. The fire they sat beside that night was smaller, more vulnerable. Like them, their enemies were moving faster now, more reckless. That meant desperation. That meant they were close. And as the stars wheeled above, Kane whispered the truth neither had dared say aloud. They won't stop until we are both dead. Violara met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Then we give them what they fear most, which is, we survive. The spark between them, once buried beneath law and resentment, had found air. The storm had not passed, but now they stood at its center, together, and that made all the difference. The throne room of Zara had never known such stillness. Once a hall of decrees and defiance, it now echoed with a quiet breath of anticipation. At the center stood Vylara, not in ceremonial robes, but in battle-worn armor, silver and scorched. Her crown, usually kept locked away, rested in her hand, not on her brow. She faced the gathered nobles, advisors, and foreign delegates who had come to witness a reckoning. To her right stood Cain. His presence alone marked the impossible made real, not as prisoner, not as enemy, but as equal. Weeks had passed since the ambush beneath the cliffs, since the poisoned blade had nearly stolen his life. In that time, they had burned down a network of conspirators spanning both realms. Nobles from Verdant who feared Cain's alliance with Zara, Jaron generals who resented Vylara's restraint, all united by a single sigil, the Broken Circle, and by a purpose clear now, destabilize the bond and return both kingdoms to war. But war was no longer acceptable. Not to her, not to him, not after what they had endured together. By now you've heard the rumors, Vylara said, her voice slicing through the silence like a blade, that I've bent the knee, that I've lost my fire, that I have been conquered by tradition, or worse, by him. She looked at Cain, then back to the court. You're wrong. She paced slowly, each step deliberate. I have not been conquered. I have chosen. I chose to keep my blade sheathed when every instinct screamed otherwise. I chose to believe that peace does not weaken us, that unity with Verdant strengthens Zara's flame, not douses it. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one spoke aloud. Cain stepped forward, his tone calm but resolute. I did not come to Zara to break it. I came because I saw in Vylara what I lacked, conviction born of purpose. And though we were made enemies by history, I have come to see her not as a threat, but as the measure of what leadership should be. Their bond had evolved, unspoken but undeniable, neither romantic ideal nor political convenience. It had grown from hardship, forged like the weapons in Zara's sacred fires, and it had earned its place in this hall. The high priestess, custodian of tradition, and keeper of the ancient laws, stepped forward. Her ceremonial staff tapped once against the marble. The cycle is complete, she intoned. By right, the bond may now be dissolved. A beat passed. Vylara didn't move. The hall seemed to lean forward. Then, slowly, she raised the crown in her hand and placed it atop her head. It shimmered in the torchlight like fire about to leap. I reject dissolution, she said, clear and defiant. The bond stands. Gasps scattered across the chamber, like shards of glass. Even Cain looked stunned. Vylara turned to him, the weight of her choice heavy but unregretted. You stood beside me when the world turned. You bled for my people. You never demanded loyalty, only offered your own. He met her gaze. Then I give it again. Freely. The priestess bowed slightly. So be it. The bond holds. But peace never settled so easily. The broken circle had been fractured, not destroyed. As the court filed out and the murmurs turned to schemes and corners, one figure lingered in the shadows of the colonnade. A girl no older than 20, dressed in a merchant's tunic, eyes dark with fury. A sigil gleamed faintly on her wrist, half burned. The broken circle. She watched the leaders exit side by side, their alliance solidified. She whispered, almost reverently, "We will not be erased." And then she vanished into the crowd. That night, as the city celebrated the unbroken bond, Vylara and Cain stood alone in the same chamber where they'd first clashed. The flames danced again, casting tall shadows. "You surprise me," Cain said softly. "You thought I'd dissolve it? I thought you might choose freedom." She met his gaze. "Maybe I did." Their hands brushed, not quite held, but not pulled away either. The war was not over, not truly. But the fire that once threatened to consume them had become something else. A light, a guide. They would face what came next together. And this time, not even law would bind them. Choice would.